Good morning, Social 9. Today we are going to get into some economic theory. At times, this is very much so going to feel like math class. We're going to be looking at supply and demand, but today specifically, I want to work through the demand side of things with you. I do ask that you have the note taker with you as we go through this PowerPoint and also some scrap paper or something like that where you can try a couple of these curves with you. Now, supply and demand is essential to understanding the idea of a market economy because in a market economy, the people choose the answers to the questions of scarcity. But there's never a coordinated effort. People aren't like, hey, let's decide how the market's going to work today. What happens is through their actions, these decisions are effectively made. And one of the ways that happens is through supply and demand. There's other factors at play. So we're going to go into the weeds a little bit. You're a strong class. You can handle some of this, I think. So what I would like to do is just work through some of this together. So again, we'll work on the demand aspect today. We'll do the supply aspect on the next day to better understand market economies and in some ways Canada's mixed economy. So as we go, I want you to think about something that is perhaps unique to you. This just came across, so I laughed. But what are the things that you buy obsessively? Is it candy? Is it a certain kind of pop? Is it model cars? What are the things that you spend your money on? Because that's going to be an important driver of demand for that product. You're voting with your dollars. It could be through donuts. There's an activity that we might get to involving donuts. We'll just see how things progress. So let's get into what demand is. And here's where we'll get your notes kind of rolling here. So ultimately, demand is the quantity of goods a consumer is willing and able to purchase at various prices. Those words are kind of essential here. Willing, they have to be willing to part with their money on it, and they must be able. So let's take a look at the able aspect. Right there, something we're working on in grade 11, the Palace of Versailles. To have demand, you must be able to purchase it. You may want a palace, but you don't have demand for it, since, as far as I know, none of you, and certainly I don't, have the purchasing power to be able to buy a palace, let alone the palace at Versailles. Now, you also must be willing to purchase it. So that gaudy Christmas sweater, I don't know, maybe a couple of you might wear that. Uh, you have to be willing to purchase it. If there's no will, there's no intent to buy something, then there exists no demand. So the law of demand, you've seen this in your textbook with the lovely arrows going up, arrows going down. The law of demand says when the price increases, the quantity demanded decreases. And then it's inverted. If the price decreases, the quantity demanded will increase. Now, that inverse relationship, if we are in a first year economics class, would look something like that. There is my price, and there's my quantity demanded. See, this is feeling very much so like math class. I can feel your mathy angst as you're like, oh no, we're going to do equations. Not quite, but I figured you guys are strong enough you can handle seeing the intro economics stuff. So here's effectively what a demand graph will look like. There will be an x-axis with quantity, a y-axis with price, and you'll notice that the graph is trending downward. Right, there we go. And demand graphs always trend downward. It's always sloping down. And the reason for that is because of these effects here. So the income effect and the substitution effect. The law of diminishing marginal utility is also kind of interesting. We'll come to that. Maybe I'll explain it with pizza or something like that. Uh, but really, the first two are going to drive this here. So the income effect, just as we have mentioned, says that when prices rise, a consumer is less able to purchase something. And the opposite is also true. So we spend a lot of time talking about fast food and Domino's. So something like the dollar menu or your discount burger or snack, wherever it may be, right? That is going to have an increased demand when it's really cheap. When Burger King does its ridiculously cheap chicken nuggets, things like that. As you start upping the price, consumers as a whole are less able to purchase something. So again, there's our price and our quantity demanded in the equation there. Now, the substitution effect is actually a little more interesting as well, because if there's a substitute for a good, you are less willing and able to buy the good if the substitute is cheaper. Now, a classic example of this, obviously, is your Coke versus Pepsi, but it also is problematic because people seem to have very clear tastes for pop and things like that. So I always find that interesting, how loyal people are. But if Pepsi or Coke or whatever was super different in terms of its pricing structure, if Coke went up to, $5 a bottle and Pepsi was $2 a bottle, you would see more and more people drinking Pepsi. They are effectively substitutes. Similarly, when many of you go out for your summer outings or whatever, you might get the quote unquote knockoff pop. The co op brand pop is what I had growing up. And again, it's cheaper. It fulfills the same want. So there that will shift the demand for Coke in this case down. All right, and now utility is the usefulness. We don't want to get into the weeds too much here, but the idea is how much value is there in getting an additional unit of this good. If I have another one, uh, are there benefits? Now, on the low end of things, we see this when you go to the convenience store and you bring your pop up to the counter, and the guy's like, "Oh, but it's, if you buy one, it's 250, but if you buy three, it's 550." Now, that pitch gets some people who are like, "Whoa, that's a really good deal." It doesn't work on other people, and they're like, "No, I can only drink one pop, or I'm going to get sick." Now, if that's true on the low end, start imagining on the high end, a certain product like a bandsaw or something like that you're spending a good chunk of change on. If I have one bandsaw, I probably don't need six of them. So this is going to have an impact here as well. Again, we don't want to go too into the weeds on marginal utility. If you do an economics course at college or university, this will be a more important factor that you discuss. All right, so when we look at it, there is also something to be said here about, say, pizza. I already used the example of pop, I guess. But if I keep buying something, right, as a kid, I bought so much bubble gum to the point that I threw up one day, and I haven't bought bubble gum since. Goods lose usefulness each time you consume or purchase another, and your satisfaction is going to decrease along with it. All right, so if we look here is a simple demand schedule. Here is a listing of prices, and you'll notice that there is a certain quantity demanded at each price. Now, those of you that are really savvy are going to start running the numbers here and be like, all right, if I'm a business, what is my optimal amount? And if I'm looking at this, right, it's very tempting to be like, yeah, I want to sell this product for $10. But then you'll notice you only sell one of them. Similarly, in this demand schedule, at $2, you're going to have a whole bunch more demand, but it's not going to be enough to compensate. So as we're looking at things like demand schedules, you want to kind of do some math and figure out as a business person, where would I go with this? How would I want to try to find my optimal price point? And I gave you this example with our dinosaur stuffies at Fossil World and Drum. So here you'll notice that the best bang for the buck of the business person is at $6. They'll sell 3 units, generating $18. All right, so if we price that out, let's use this graph. Here is our price line, and there is our quantity. It looks something like that. And you will notice here, I think we actually got a little bit wonky on it because it's supposed to be, oh no, 2 at 8. Yep, well, that's good. So if you notice, there are certain uh, items here, and we see where the pieces are at. And so we can pick any individual point here and take a look. And so we'll see that at $8, the quantity demanded is 2. So what you do is you line up, all right, here's my price, and then you follow it down. So this is the opposite of the chart. I could have you recreate that chart on the last slide based on this graph. Similarly, I could have you graph this chart or graph this out based on the chart. Yeah, we're getting into your math stuff now, I realize. Now, as the price changes, we will notice some differences here. So when the price is lowered to $6, the quantity demanded increases. We saw that in the chart, and now we're seeing it in the graph. The arrows here are showing you where the movement is occurring. So first, price goes down, and quantity demanded goes up. So the price change means there is movement along the demand curve. The point A is now sliding down. But as of right now, it's staying on this curve, which actually is just a slope, a line at the moment. But it trends with it. It can't ever escape this right now. Okay? And there is our movement there. All right. So what I want you to do for the moment is I want you to take a moment to perhaps pause the video and just see if you can answer these questions. If you can't answer any one of them, just jot them down and you can shoot me an email, you can hop onto office hours, anything like that is fine. So again, a really good opportunity to pause the video. All right, so you've taken a go at those questions, you've reviewed, we've seen the basics of what a demand curve looks like, and now I'm really going to mess with you a little bit. We're going to start moving that line around along with the points along the line. So let's start with a couple of ideas here. And let's use this. So the price of a latte at Starbucks is raised from $4 to $8. Will that cause an increase or decrease in the quantity demanded, or why? That question you can give me in an answer on a Google Doc, along with question 2 here. Movie tickets at the theater were $11 last week. Today, they lowered the price of a ticket to $5.50. Will that cause an increase or decrease in quantity demanded, and why? And no, don't tell me that the movie theater isn't open, because of COVID-19. There's something called pent-up demand we'll talk about at a later date. Use these questions as a basis. I'll also post them on the website for you to answer, and these questions I am going to mark for you. All right, so as we look at the shifts in demand, these are some questions. Again, I want you to be reminded about what is demand, what's the law of demand, what makes demand have a downward slope. So as we look at the demand curve, again, we notice the price line is along the y-axis, the quantity along the x-axis, and there is our demand curve, slope, whatever there. And there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, right? If the price goes up, quantity demanded goes down, and vice versa. So as we see the changes in the quantity demanded, that is the result of a price change. When we go back to that weird line, that's that point A to point B moving or shifting. That's what's happening. You move from one point on the curve to another point on the curve. But demand itself can also shift. Where that line is going through, or where that line is actually on the graph, that can actually move as well. So as we go through, we are going to see the entire curve move on the graph. If we increase in demand, not the quantity demanded, if just demand itself increases, people are willing and able to buy more of a good at every single price level. Similarly, if there is an overall decrease in demand, people are willing and able to buy less of a good at every price level. So let's take a look at how that might play out here. And the way it's going to play out is you're going to see the line physically move on the graph. So if our initial demand curve was here, right, this D1, and there is an overall increase in demand. People are willing and able to buy more of this good at every single price point. Then the demand is going to shift right. Obviously, my graph should probably extend out this way, but I digress. All right. Similarly, if we see a decrease in demand, meaning people are less able and less willing to buy along every individual price point here, then we are going to see a leftward slope, right? It's going to run up against the side here, and we'll see a peak. The price will sell a much lower quantity than it did before. And even at a low price, the new peak quantity sold is going to be much lower than over here. Now, there's a whole bunch of reasons the demand will shift. There's actually 6 of them. Here we go. Well, 7 in this case, but we're going to combine substitute goods and complementary goods together. They're technically separate, but logically it makes more sense to lump them together. So income is how much people make. Tastes and preferences are going to change over time, whether high heels are in or out, for instance. We've already talked about substitute goods a little bit, this idea of my Coke versus Pepsi versus Co-op brand. Things like complementary goods are, like if you think about s'mores, graham crackers, chocolate, and marshmallows are all complementary goods. And these other things are less impactful here. The number of buyers, if people think the price is going to go up in the future, this is how we get to hoarding. All of this kind of follows along. So let's, oh, that did not work out super well. Not sure why that's looking the way it is. Uh, Ultimately, though, as we are going, there are things called inferior goods and normal goods. An inferior good is like your Ichiban. A normal good, in some cases almost premium, is like, a steak, a nice cut of meat at Bashan Meats or something like that. And you will notice here, I want to get rid of the images. Again, I apologize for the lines. This shouldn't have shown up this way. But for inferior goods like your Ichiban, the demand is actually going to decrease when a person's income increases. People buy less of that stuff. I can certainly say, as a university student, I bought a whole bunch of Ichiban. And now that I actually have money coming in, it's not something that I regularly purchase. Demand will increase though when income decreases. A normal good, so in this case steak, that is going to follow more logically. So demand will increase while the income increases. And if my income goes down, my demand for steak at Balshaw Meats is going to go down. All right. So tastes and preferences are also going to be at play here. When I was growing up as a child of the 90s, there were fads galore, things like Beanie Babies and Tamagotchis. These fads also caused a change in demand because like everybody had to have Beanie Babies. Didn't matter if you were a guy or a girl. They were packed in every McDonald's Happy Meal. Tamagotchi kind of took over these little virtual pets. And so as the tastes and preferences change, you'll see a change in the demand curve as well. I think Beanie Babies still exist. I see them at like old people gift shops. Uh, that sounds really mean, but that's where you see Beanie Babies anymore. And that's about it. They're certainly not the cultural phenomenon they once were. All right. So substitute goods we've already talked about as well. You could have, various meat options. So I might have the deli fresh variety. I might have the option to go direct to my butcher. I might have canned ham or spam. Any of these are potential substitute goods. So if the price of a good increases, let's say a nice bone-in ham from Bashan Meats, the quantity demanded will decrease. So if they jack up that bone-in ham to some huge price, that demand is going to decrease. But substitutes like Spam, they will see a demand increase at this time. This will work opposite. If the price of a good, so that bone-in ham gets really, really cheap at Bashan Meats, then the quantity demanded will increase, but people will not be out buying Spam. They won't be out buying canned ham whatsoever because they're going to go straight to their butcher shop and buy it. So it all kind of works like this. So here we have the substitute goods. If the price of the normal good increases, the quantity demanded decreases, the demand for substitute goods increases, and it's just opposite in the case of a price decrease. All right, now complementary goods, as I've already mentioned, are goods that go together. They sell almost like a package deal, if you will. So I use my graham crackers example, right? Graham crackers, marshmallows, and chocolate tend to be complementary goods because you want to make delicious, delicious s'mores. So if the price of one of those goods increases, the quantity demanded will decrease and the complements demand will decrease with it. It's literally dragging it down with it, but riding a high tide or a good wave together as well. So again, to give you the simple graph, if the price of the good decreases on the bottom here, right, then the quantity demanded will increase, and the demand for complementary goods will increase as well. So if the price of graham crackers goes down, more people want to buy graham crackers, more people also going to want to buy marshmallows and chocolate to make those amazing s'mores. All right. Now, the overall number of buyers, this makes logical sense. If there's more buyers in an area, there's more demand. If there's fewer buyers, there is less demand. This mostly makes sense, like if you're creating a new neighborhood or something like that. So when I was in Lethbridge, I lived on the west side of Lethbridge, which was very, very underdeveloped. But there was one grocery store. I think there was two gas stations, but it had like a third of the population of Lethbridge there. So there was pent up demand, right? There, all these people wanted to buy stuff, but they had to go elsewhere. Well, last time I went to Lethbridge a few months ago, there was like 12 of everything. There's Tim Hortons, like there's a Tim Hortons basically right next to where I used to live. And that is a result of more people living there. There is now more demand for various goods. So the demand curve actually shifted to increase there. Expectations. This is where we get to the hoarding effectively. If we expect our future income to decrease, our demand will decrease with that. We'll start saving, okay? So we start saving money, we start putting it aside, and so our demand, we stop buying things. So if I expect that, I might be out of a job in a few months, I'm going to start tucking away my money. I'm going to start saving. Instead of buying the steak, I'm going to buy, ground beef. So if I expect that I'm about to get a big pay raise, I might start treating myself. I might start, eating out more often. I might buy that nice watch I've been eyeing up. Whatever the case may be, is where I will be playing it out. So I have expectations for my future income, but I also have expectations for future prices. And if I expect prices to increase in the future, demand increases immediately. So we expected, or at least I think society expected prices to increase dramatically on hand sanitizer in this COVID pandemic. So people started buying it all now. Similarly, if we expect a product to decrease in value, we won't buy it now. Why would we? If we know that they're overproducing something, why would we buy something now when we can buy it later? This is actually happening with our fuel pricing at the moment. Because in our fuel pricing, we know two countries, Russia and Saudi Arabia, are overproducing it. And we know our gas prices are going to continue to decrease for the foreseeable future. So people aren't really going out of their way to buy it. However, if we hear that a solution has been truly reached in those countries and that they're going to, help North America out, you'd expect to see people start filling up their tanks. If a new carbon tax was implemented in Alberta, you would see people at the pumps filling up their tanks right now because they expect the price to increase. So the demand is increasing right this moment. All right. And of course, there is expectations of what the product will do for you. This is mostly like in the health industry, right? If a product is good for you, demand increases. If we know a product is bad for you, generally the demand decreases. The tobacco industry says hi, kind of proving you all wrong with the whole vaping thing, but let's just ignore them for right now. So we can remember all of these things, the income, the tastes and preferences, related goods, all of that. With the mnemonic in times past, really good white beans existed. I'm not sure, again, my PowerPoint got up. Preferences shouldn't be here at all. But in times past, really good white beans existed. If you have a better mnemonic, please let me know. I would love to replace this one. All right. So again, we'll go back to questions to think about here. The price of a movie ticket has increased to $25. Again, I know there's no movie theaters open. Will this cause a change in demand, or will it cause a change in the quantity demanded? What I'm asking here is, will the demand curve shift to the left or to the right, or will it be a point A nudging down to point B? My second question, the price of peanut butter has increased. What will happen to the demand for jelly? In both of these cases, I want you to create a graph for me